We're back to the Neil Haley Show and also the Media Giant Effect. I'm excited to welcome the program from Simkovich Concussion Institute, Dr. Charles Simkovich. Dr. Charles, how are you? Thanks for stopping by again.
Good. How are you today?
Fantastic. So we're going to go right into this topic, car accidents. We've been talking a lot about sports injuries, and we'll jump back onto that next week again. But when you talk about specifically being in a car accident, this is an area where a lot of times there is trauma that happens to you in a car accident that you just don't think about at the first time a point of contact, that you could have a concussion or you could have, or a brain-related injury from a car crash, correct?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The car accidents are actually interesting. The most common question I get is, what do I see the most concussions from? Everybody assumes it's sports related, football, hockey, but it's actually car accidents, auto accidents, and it's just sheer numbers. There are a lot more people in the world driving than there are playing sports. And the fact is, these are big, heavy machines traveling at high rates of speed. So when you have a big impact, people are affected, and the concussions from car accidents are can have the potential to be very damaging. Luckily, when we were doing our original research for all of this work, I was lucky enough to have a patient who's the CEO of the Society of Automotive Engineers, SAE, and their international corporate headquarters are in Warrendale, Pennsylvania, which is about 6 miles north of me. They had an unbelievable research library that was full of information to help formulate and help us understand what car accidents actually do to people who sustain trauma and head injuries from them. It goes far greater than just structural damage. This fellow was nice enough to give me the run of the place, and he since has passed away actually years ago. But you have, most of the time in car accidents, multiple, what would seemingly be multiple concussions from the actual injury itself. If you're, let's talk about G-force first. For having pressure. At 8 Gs, an astronaut will pass out, or pilot, from the pressure. In a 15-mile-an-hour collision straight from behind, there's 12 G forces exerted on the brainstem of the spine. So we're talking a greater force than what makes an astronaut pass out. It's instantaneous. As the speed gets higher, the force that you're hit with goes greater and greater. Unfortunately, a rotational force, or in other words, if you're spun or if your head's turned at the point of impact, that's even a greater force that they can't even measure. It's exponentially higher. That brings up what's called a concussion. You can have a concussion without hitting your head, such as in a whiplash. It's called a coup contra coup injury. When your head is whipped forward and backwards rapidly, your brain actually bounces off the inside of the skull and then rebounds and hits the opposite side. So your brain gets hit by a hard bone twice. You add to that, a lot of times in accidents, people will hit their head on the headrest or the side window, or the airbag is deployed, which is like getting punched in the face. I believe the force is equal to like a 20 gauge shotgun shell that deploys that bag, because it has to come out. It inflates very quickly. Even though it's a bag, it inflates when it's fully inflated. It's a hard surface that you can hit your face. So car accidents traditionally do more damage than even sports injuries. I have, for one case in particular, was a fellow who had just graduated from Pitt Dental School. And on the night of graduation, he was in a car accident where his head hit the door of the car so hard it separated it from the frame. But this fellow graduated from dental school with honors. And for 2 years, he couldn't pass his national boards, which you need to get licensed to practice. He was unloading trucks for UPS for 2 years with a dental degree. Anyway, he got referred to me. He went through the treatment plan, and he had failed the national boards for 2 years. After we were done with the treatment plan, 6 weeks later, he passed his national boards. He's now been in practice for 15 years. And the guy actually gets very emotional when he's sharing that story, because he could have lost his livelihood.
Mm-hmm.
I have a surgeon who she was hit in a car accident 70 miles an hour, and she was living in her basement for a year, didn't practice. She was living in the dark with sunglasses on. And anyway, she came to be treated, and within 6 weeks, she was back to practice. She's now working 14 hours a day, back to practice. Interestingly enough, this same surgeon had gone through, evaluated for vision therapy, which is a therapy that's very valuable and it's great in rehabbing concussions after they're done with our protocol. And she got evaluated and then she got treated. And then she went back and got evaluated. And the eye doctor said, you know, your eyes are perfect, but she knew she didn't do any of the vision therapy because it's all done online. And said, asked what happened. Well, a lot of times when you remedy the structural faults involved with the cranial bones from the trauma, the eye muscles attach to these different bones, and cranial nerves that control eye movement pass through the sphenoid bone, and your optic nerve passes through there. So once you stabilize this, the malfunctioning of these cranial bones, the eye muscles just start working well on their own. So a lot of times, you know, they can forego those different types of therapies. So yeah, car accidents, if you think about it, you know, you're traveling at high rates of speeds.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So this is it. Go to Simkovich concussioninstitute.com right now to schedule a call with you, Dr. Charles, because here's the issue. A lot of people get in car accidents and they don't go see you. And then they might never, and then they see all these complications that you talked about in these stories. So I appreciate you stopping by again.
Oh, anytime. Thank you.
All right. You're listening and watching The Neil Haley Show, and we'll be back in just a moment.